July 18th, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy, France. 9:37 a.m. The ground is already trembling. Not from explosions, from expectation. American infantry lie low in shallow cover, pressed into the earth, helmets tight, rifles clutched. No one is speaking, because above them, the sky is beginning to fill. A distant hum grows louder. Engines. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. You can almost feel it. That low vibration in your chest before anything even happens. Private James Walker lifts his head slightly, just enough to see the sky. Dark shapes moving in formation. Bombers. Wave after wave. Perfect alignment. Controlled. Planned. This is it. The moment they've been waiting for. A massive bombing strike designed to break the enemy line. To open the way forward. To end the stalemate. Officers move along the line, shouting final reminders. Stay down. Keep your heads low. Because everyone knows what's coming next. But knowing doesn't make it easier. The bombers reach position, and then the first bombs fall. A whistle cuts through the air. Then impact. A massive explosion tears into the ground ahead. Dirt erupts skyward. Smoke follows instantly. Another whistle. Another explosion. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire horizon begins to disappear behind fire and debris. The ground shakes violently now. Not once. Constantly. Relentless. The air fills with sound. Explosions overlapping. One after another. No pause. No space between them. Walker presses his face into the dirt. You can almost feel it. The pressure. The force of each blast pushing through the ground. Through your body. Above, the bombers continue their run. Precise. Uninterrupted. They release payload after payload. Because this is not a strike. It's a saturation. Designed to overwhelm everything below. In less than a minute, the battlefield transforms. What was once terrain is now chaos. Trees ripped apart. Positions erased. Structures collapsing instantly. Anything above ground doesn't last. A soldier nearby tries to look up. Another explosion forces him back down. There is no safe direction. Because the bombs are not falling in one place. They are falling everywhere. A continuous wave of destruction. And it's only just begun. Minute 2 begins. But time doesn't feel real anymore. Because everything is happening too fast. Too intense. The bombardment grows heavier. More bombs. Closer impacts. The line between ahead and nearby begins to blur. Walker clenches his fists tighter. Because now, it feels closer than expected. Too close. Another explosion hits the ground nearby. Dirt showers over him. Someone shouts something, but it's lost in the noise. Because the sound now is overwhelming. A constant roar. The kind that drowns out thought itself. And above it all, the bombers keep coming. Wave after wave. Each one adding more force, more destruction. Because this isn't about precision anymore. It's about scale. Overwhelming scale. Within just a few minutes, entire sections of the battlefield cease to exist. Not damaged. Erased. And still, the bombing continues. Because this strike was planned to last. Not seconds. Minutes. And those minutes are changing everything. Walker risks another glance upward. The sky is no longer clear. Smoke and dust rise so high they begin to block the sun. The air itself feels heavier. Thicker. Harder to breathe. Because every explosion adds more to it. More debris. More pressure. More chaos. And somewhere inside all of it, a realization begins to form. This is not just support. This is something else. Something larger. Something uncontrollable once it starts. And they are right in the middle of it. Minute 5. But it feels like much longer, because every second carries the weight of multiple impacts. And the bombing is not slowing down. It's building, getting stronger, closer, more intense. And no one on the ground knows exactly where it will stop. Because once this kind of force is unleashed, control becomes uncertain. And uncertainty is where danger begins. July 18th, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy. 9:42 a.m. Minute 6. The bombardment doesn't slow. It tightens. Explosions begin landing closer together, closer to the front, compressing the chaos into a narrower space. What was a distant wall of fire is now a moving edge, and it's coming forward. Private James Walker feels it before he understands it. The pressure changes. The impacts sound sharper, closer, too close. Another blast hits, near enough to lift the ground beneath him. Dirt slams across his helmet. His ears ring, a high, piercing tone cutting through the thunder. He presses lower, but there is nowhere lower to go. Short, they're dropping short. The words tear through the noise, half heard, half guessed. A lieutenant scrambles along the line, waving his arms, trying to signal. Smoke panels are dragged out, colored cloths unfurled. Anything that might be visible from above. But above, there is only smoke. Thick, rising columns swallowing landmarks, swallowing lines, swallowing the difference between friendly and enemy positions. To the bombers, the ground has become a blurred grid. Coordinates set before takeoff. Lines drawn on a map, but maps don't move. And the battlefield does. Another wave arrives. Engines overhead. Bomb bay doors opening. More bombs fall. This time, into the wrong space. Impacts ripple across the American forward positions. Men who were bracing for shock now face something else entirely. Friendly fire. A truck erupts in flame. A machine gun position disappears under a column of earth. Walker feels the blast hit his side hard enough to push the breath out of him. For a second, he can't inhale. He forces air back in. Dust. Smoke. Everything tastes like metal. Mark the line. Mark the line. Officers shout, but their voices vanish under the constant roar. Radios crackle. Messages are sent. Coordinates repeated. But time is against them. Because the bombers are already committed. Already in their runs. Already releasing. Minute 8. The bombing is now overlapping itself. Explosions land where explosions just were. The ground is no longer stable. Crater inside crater. Shockwave inside shockwave. The difference between incoming and impact disappears. It is continuous. Walker lifts his head again and sees something he shouldn't. American helmets. Not far ahead, too close to where the bombs are falling. Another detonation. The figures vanish. Not moving. Not retreating. Gone. The realization spreads through the line. This isn't isolated. This is happening across the front. Repeatedly. Systematically. Because once the alignment is off, every following wave inherits the same error. And there are still more waves. Another formation crosses overhead. The ground crews below try again. Panels lifted higher. Signals more frantic. But visibility is worse now. Smoke has turned the battlefield into a single color. Grey. Moving. Indistinct. To the bombardiers, it all looks the same. Target area. Release. Bombs fall again. Closer. Direct. A command post is hit. Communication lines snap completely. Now even the attempt to correct the mistake begins to fail. Minute 10. The pressure is unbearable. Each blast feels heavier. As if the air itself is being crushed down. Walker presses his hands into the dirt, fingers digging in, because holding on to something solid feels like the only way to stay grounded. Around him, men stop trying to move. Movement draws attention. Movement draws impact. So they stay still and hope the next bomb lands somewhere else. Anywhere else. But hope has no control here, because this is no longer a controlled strike. It's momentum. And momentum doesn't stop quickly. The final waves approach. The largest yet. Their engines fill the sky again. Below, the soldiers brace. Not for the enemy. For their own. Because they know what's coming. And they know they can't stop it. Minute 12. Bombs fall in rapid succession. Explosions chain across the ground. Left. Right. Center. Every direction. The battlefield disappears entirely into smoke and flame. For a moment, there is nothing visible. Nothing clear. Only force. Relentless, overwhelming force. And then, suddenly, silence begins to return. The bombers pass. The engines fade. The impacts stop. Minute 13. And with it, the bombing ends. But what it leaves behind is something no one expected. Because when the smoke begins to clear, the truth will be impossible to ignore. July 18th, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy. 9:51 a.m. The sound doesn't stop all at once. It drains away, like a tide pulling back. Engines fade into distance. Explosions echo, then weaken, then disappear. And for the first time in 13 minutes, there is silence. Not complete, but enough to notice. And that silence feels wrong. Private James Walker lifts his head slowly. His ears are still ringing. A constant high pitch that makes everything feel distant. He blinks. Dust falls from his helmet. The air is thick, heavy, hard to see through, but shapes begin to form. The battlefield returns. And what it reveals doesn't look like a battlefield anymore. It looks erased. The ground is unrecognizable. Where there were positions, there are craters. Where there were vehicles, there are fragments. Where there were men, there is nothing. Walker pushes himself up onto his elbows. Every movement feels slow, delayed, because his body is still catching up to what just happened. Around him, others begin to move. Some crawl. Some sit up. Some don't move at all. A voice calls out, "Weak. Medic." Then another. And another. The silence breaks. Not with orders. With pain. Medics begin moving immediately. No structure. No clear path. Just instinct. Because there is too much to cover. Too many wounded. And not enough hands. Walker tries to stand. His legs shake. He steadies himself against the ground. Looks around again. Trying to find something familiar. Anything. But the landscape has changed. Completely. Landmarks are gone. Positions gone. The line itself is gone. A soldier nearby turns slowly in a circle. Confused. Because he doesn't know where he is anymore. Because nothing matches what it was. This isn't disorientation. This is transformation. A command voice rises somewhere behind the smoke. Regroup, regroup here. But regroup where? There is no clear center. No defined edge. Only fragments of what used to be a formation. And those fragments don't connect easily. A destroyed vehicle burns slowly in the distance. The only thing still moving is smoke. Rising. Drifting. Covering everything. Walker stumbles forward. Each step uncertain. Because the ground itself feels unstable. Soft. Broken. He reaches what used to be a forward position. Or what he thinks was. There's nothing left. Just a crater. Deep. Wide. And silent. He looks into it. Then away. Because some things don't need to be confirmed. Nearby, an officer tries to gather survivors. Counting. But the numbers don't match. Too many missing. Too many unaccounted for. Reports begin forming. Scattered. Incomplete. But the pattern is clear. Bombs fell short. Repeatedly. Across multiple waves. Not once. Not twice. Again and again. Walker hears the words but doesn't fully process them. Because the reality is already in front of him. This wasn't just destruction. This was internal. Self-inflicted. And that changes how it feels. Because enemy fire is expected. This was not. A soldier nearby drops to his knees. Not from injury, from realization. Because sometimes the hardest thing to understand is not what the enemy did, but what went wrong. Minutes pass. Then more. Slowly, structure begins to return. Units reform. Commands become clearer. Positions re-established. Not because everything is fixed, but because stopping completely is not an option. The mission still exists. The objective still stands. And despite everything that just happened, they will continue. But something has changed. Not just the battlefield, the mindset. Because now, every man knows something he didn't before. That danger doesn't always come from where you expect. And that in war, a single mistake can reshape everything. But the full cost of those 13 minutes hasn't been counted yet. And when it is, it will change more than just this moment. July 18th, 1944. Near St. Lo, Normandy. 11:06 a.m. The numbers don't come all at once. They arrive in fragments. A name here. A missing unit there. A report that doesn't match another. Because the battlefield itself is still being understood. Officers move through what remains of their lines, clipboards in hand, pencils hovering, then stopping. Because writing it down makes it real. And what they're seeing is hard to put into numbers. Private James Walker sits on the edge of a shallow crater, helmet off, hands still coated in dirt. He watches as a group of soldiers carries a wounded man past him. Slowly. Carefully. Because every movement now matters. The pace of everything has changed. From chaos to consequence. Nearby, a sergeant calls out names. No response. Calls again. Still nothing. He marks something down. Moves on. Because he has to. Because there are more names. Too many. The scale begins to take shape. Entire squads gone. Sections wiped out. Support units erased before they could even act. Not pushed back. Not defeated. Removed. A communications officer kneels beside a broken radio set, turning dials that no longer connect to anything. The lines that once held everything together are gone. Because coordination was the foundation. And for 13 minutes, that foundation collapsed. Inside command positions further back, reports are finally being consolidated. The tone changes quickly. This is no longer confusion. This is recognition. A large-scale failure of alignment. Bombing runs misdirected. Markers missed. Signals delayed. And once it started, it couldn't be corrected fast enough. Because the operation had momentum, and momentum doesn't stop on command. The result is now clear. Hundreds of casualties. Thousands affected. All within a window too short to react. Too fast to correct. A single officer reads through the reports, then stops. Because one name stands out. Lieutenant General Leslie J. McNair. Killed during the bombardment. One of the highest-ranking American officers to die in combat. Not by enemy fire, but by friendly bombs. The room falls silent. Because that detail changes everything. This isn't just a battlefield error. It's a moment that reaches far beyond it. Because if someone at that level can be lost like this, then no one is beyond the consequences. Back on the ground, Walker stands again. He looks out over the broken terrain, trying to understand it. Trying to make sense of something that happened too fast to process. Because that's what 13 minutes did. It didn't give time for reaction. It didn't allow adjustment. It simply happened. And then it was over. But what it left behind is still unfolding. The mission continues. Orders are still given. Units still move forward. Because the operation itself cannot stop. Too much depends on it. The breakthrough still needs to happen. The line still needs to be pushed. So despite the cost, the advance resumes. Slow at first. Careful. Measured. Because something has changed. Not just in strategy. In awareness. Because now they know that even the most powerful support can become the greatest risk. And that understanding will follow every step forward. Because the lesson of those 13 minutes is not just about what happened. It's about what must never happen again. But even with that lesson, the war doesn't pause. It moves on. And what happened here will shape how it moves. July 19th, 1944. Normandy front. The battlefield looks different in daylight. Not clearer. Just more permanent. Smoke has thinned. Fires have settled. But the damage remains. Cratered ground stretches across what used to be a coordinated front line. Vehicles sit twisted and burned. Equipment lies scattered. And between it all, silence. Not the silence of peace. The silence after something irreversible. Private James Walker moves with the rest of his unit, stepping carefully through the broken terrain. Each step feels deliberate now. Because yesterday proved something. That even when everything is planned, everything can still go wrong. And when it does, it happens fast. Too fast. Behind the front lines, command structures are already changing. Reports from the bombing have reached higher levels. Detailed. Specific. Analyzed immediately. Because this wasn't just a tactical issue. It was systemic. Air-ground coordination is reviewed. Procedures rewritten. Bombing alignment protocols adjusted. Marker systems improved. Communication channels reinforced. Because what happened cannot be repeated. Not at that scale. Not again. And that urgency drives change faster than anything else. In war, lessons are often learned slowly. But not this time. This time, the lesson is immediate. Because the cost made it impossible to ignore. Back on the ground, units continue advancing. Operation Cobra moves forward. German defenses, already weakened by the bombardment, begin to collapse. Gaps open. Opportunities appear. Momentum builds. The breakthrough that had been planned is finally happening. But it feels different now. Heavier. Because the path forward includes what happened behind. Walker moves past a destroyed position. He doesn't stop, but he notices it. Everyone does. Because even as progress begins, the memory remains. Not just as loss, as awareness. Because now, every soldier understands something they didn't fully grasp before. That war is not only about facing the enemy. It's about managing everything around you. Timing, communication, precision. Because without those, even the strongest force can turn inward. And when it does, the consequences are immediate. Unforgiving. Further ahead, tanks begin to roll through newly opened ground. Infantry follows. Artillery shifts forward. The operation regains its structure. But the structure is different now. Stronger. More cautious. Because it has been tested. And it failed once. That failure becomes the reason it doesn't fail again. By midday, the advance accelerates. German lines begin to break completely. Retreat becomes inevitable. And what started as a stalled front turns into movement. Real movement. The kind that changes the direction of a campaign. But even as the success becomes clear, the origin of that success is complicated. Because part of what made it possible came at a cost no one intended. And that cost is not forgotten. Not by those who were there. Not by those who study it later. Because those 13 minutes did more than reshape a battlefield. They reshaped understanding of coordination, of risk, of how quickly control can be lost, and how important it is to regain it. Walker looks forward as his unit moves. The horizon is open now. The path ahead is clear. But behind him is a lesson written into the ground, one that will follow every step forward. Because in war, some moments don't just pass. They define what comes next. And this was one of them.